Jeremy Quinton Lewis, the named leader of the 59 Hoover gang, a subset of the notorious Crips that officials say had staked its claim in Columbia, Maryland, found guilty of murder and other gang-related charges.
A Montgomery County gang leader is going to be spending the next 15 years in jail as the gang begins to crumble.
Andres Cortez is the man, and among other things, he's accused of sexually assaulting a teenager.
Cortez is believed to have started the gang in his Wheaton Middle School. You can still see this fading gang graffiti nearby.
The alleged leader of the TripleC gang, the gang who was wanted by federal authorities, has been found dead in Georgia.
The target was a gang. It was called the Murdaland Mafia Piru, or MMP. Members operated in northwest Baltimore City and neighboring county neighborhoods.
Police Commissioner Rich Worley says back in January of this year, BPD's Group Violence Unit, which is part of the mayor's group violence reduction strategy, began investigating the Kerry Boys from Carey Street, a block within the city's long-troubled Sandtown Winchester community.
Maryland's gang landscape is a patchwork of local crews and national sets whose power has ebbed and flowed across Baltimore City, its suburbs, and nearby counties. From hotel-based trafficking hubs and open-air drug markets to prison-born networks that export violence to the streets, these organizations have mixed narcotics sales, extortion, gunplay, and intimidation to control territory and silence witnesses. This dossier profiles key figures tied to that ecosystem, leaders and shot callers from Bloods-affiliated factions, Hoover sets, MS-13 cliques, and homegrown crews, along with the operations that brought them down. It also highlights how modern enforcement works: long wiretap cases, undercover buys, multi-agency task forces, state RICO-style prosecutions, and Baltimore's group violence reduction strategy, which pairs precision policing with services for those willing to step away from the life.
It was called Operation Too Close for Comfort, a pun off the alleged location of the criminal enterprise, the Comfort Inn on Baltimore-Annapolis Boulevard in Brooklyn. Focus became centered around the alleged ringleader, David Brown, who lived at the hotel and at one time controlled an entire floor of rooms there.
He used these rooms for drug sales, to hide drugs, to hide money, and for the sex trafficking victims to use for what the gang called their dates,
resulting in the arrest of Brown and 14 other gang members. A number of women were also saved.
Many of the women involved in this case were addicted to drugs themselves, and they were trafficked in the same way that the drugs were trafficked in this case.
Along with drugs, the gang was using the hotel rooms for drugs and sex.
Brown and Copeland forced women to engage in sex trafficking in exchange for their rooms and for drugs.
Many of the women involved in this case were addicted to drugs themselves, and they were trafficked in the same way that the drugs were trafficked in this case.
The leader of Operation Too Close for Comfort in Maryland was David Tico Brown. David Tico Brown was identified by Maryland authorities as the leader of a criminal organization dismantled in Operation Too Close for Comfort, a 2019-2020 probe into drug distribution and trafficking. Investigators said Brown ran the ring out of a Comfort Inn and suites on Baltimore-Annapolis Boulevard in Brooklyn and Arundel County, effectively controlling an entire floor of rooms. From there, he and his co-conspirators sold drugs, stashed cash and narcotics, and arranged trade dates, often exploiting women struggling with addiction. According to prosecutors, Brown also leveraged hotel staff and associates to avoid detection and keep the operation supplied. After an 8-month investigation that included undercover buys and surveillance, Brown and 14 associates were indicted in September 2020 on gang participation, drug distribution, and trafficking charges. Raids at the hotel and other locations recovered multiple firearms and sizable quantities of narcotics, along with 8 vehicles and about $27,000 in cash. Officials said the group coerced vulnerable women in exchange for drugs, money, or lodging. While the Attorney General called the indictments a major strike against organized crime, Brown and his co-defendants were presumed innocent unless proven guilty. Subsequent court filings note that Brown and an associate entered guilty pleas in 2021.
The target was a gang. It was called the Murderland Mafia Piru, or MMP. Members operated in northwest Baltimore City and neighboring county neighborhoods. So Windsor Mill, Gwen Oak, Howard Park, and Woodlawn and Liberty Heights, that entire area lived in fear, authorities say. And right now, MMP ran drugs, they ran guns, they laundered money at Maryland casinos, and the feds have pegged 5 non-fatal shootings and homicides on the group, but think they might be responsible for at least a dozen more. And this morning,
Dante Bailey, known as Gutta, Almighty, and Wolf, founded and led the Murdaland Mafia Piru, a violent Baltimore area subset of the Bloods. Under Bailey, the MMP, also called the Mob or mobsters, terrorized neighborhoods in northwest Baltimore City and Baltimore County through relentless drug dealing and violence. He structured the crew like La Cosa Nostra. Bailey sat at the top as the Don, with bosses, capos, lieutenants, and soldiers beneath him, all bound by a strict Omert-style code demanding absolute loyalty and lethal retaliation against informants. To climb the ranks, members were expected to fight like you are ready to die, with some earning lightning bolt tattoos after committing deletions for the mob. Bailey enforced rules like retaliation is a must and ordered death for anyone who cooperated with authorities. In 2019, after a 6-week federal trial, Bailey was convicted of racketeering and drug conspiracy. Prosecutors showed he presided over a criminal enterprise responsible for multiple and shootings, extortion, witness tampering and retaliation, and large-scale drug trafficking, including at least 5 targeted shootings, one of them fatal in 2015. That November, a federal judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Officials noted the multi-year investigation seized 42 firearms and led to convictions of 25 MMP members. Bailey's downfall following earlier indictments of more than 24 associates crippled one of Maryland's most notorious Bloods factions and revealed how his Murdaland Mafia operated like a miniature mafia, complete with hierarchy, ritual, and blood oath violence.
33 members of a criminal enterprise accused of trafficking drugs. Investigation beginning back in November 2021, when officials say they noticed an uptick in violence within the city's western and southwestern districts, including neighborhoods like Shipley Hill, Booth Boyd, and along Fayette Street. Investigators detailing detectives used undercover buys, video surveillance, and wiretaps to uncover the criminal enterprise and build a case. Of the 33 members identified, the police commissioner says 12 are repeat violent offenders and 30 have previous arrests.
James Big Man Brunson and Ernest Tidy Hudson ran a large drug trafficking organization in West and Southwest Baltimore, with strongholds in Shipley Hill, Booth Boyd, and along Fayette Street. After a 16-month investigation, prosecutors secured a sweeping 33-defendant indictment in early 2023, outlining a crew that moved drugs and enforced its turf with intimidation and gun violence. Officials described a complex hierarchy: suppliers, managers, street lieutenants, and retail dealers backed by assaults and shootings to protect the trade. On May 7, 2022, investigators say Brunson and Hudson themselves attempted to delete a man during a dispute, illustrating the cycle of retaliation surrounding the enterprise. Both men eventually pleaded guilty to racketeering offenses. In August 2024, Hudson admitted to supervising a criminal organization, major distribution, and a weapons charge. He received 25 years, with 5 years to serve without parole. In March 2025, Brunson pleaded to conspiracy and firearm counts. He was sentenced to 20 years with 15 suspended, 5 years to serve without parole, followed by probation.
Jeremy Quinton Lewis, the named leader of the 59 Hoover gang, a subset of the Notorious Crips that officials say had staked its claim in Columbia, Maryland, found guilty of and other gang-related charges. All 8 members of the 59 Hoover gang, indicted 2 years ago, now convicted. Its leader, Lewis, the latest. Investigation into the 59 Hoover gang dates back to 2020, when officials say investigators determined the gang was responsible for committing the most serious crimes in Howard County.
Jaden Ely was his mother's pride and joy. He loved football and played all 4 years at Oakland Mills High School, but his young life was cut short when he was shot behind this Exxon next to the Long Reach Village Center. He later died at shock trauma. Now, prosecutors say Jeremy Lewis, a member of the 59 Hoover gang, has been convicted of murder and other crimes. It does not stop the pain for Ely's mother. Jaden Ely's mom says she still does not know why her son was targeted Now, all she has are memories.
Jeremy Quentin Lewis led the 5'9" Hoovers in Columbia, Maryland, an offshoot linked to the nationwide Hoover criminals network. In 2024, a Howard County jury convicted him of first-degree deletion, gang leadership, and related offenses tied to a wave of violence from 2020 to 2021. Prosecutors said Lewis both ordered and personally carried out attacks to expand the gang's territory and reputation for brutality. One pivotal incident came on May 30, 2021, when Lewis orchestrated the shooting of 21-year-old Jaden Ely behind a Columbia gas station. Ely died days later. Lewis and 7 lieutenants were indicted in early 2022 as part of a countywide violent crimes initiative. While 7 co-defendants pleaded guilty and received terms ranging from 4 to 18 years, Lewis went to trial. In February 2024, jurors found him guilty of deletion, first-degree assault, multiple firearms offenses, and organizing a criminal gang resulting in death. The judge imposed life without the possibility of parole plus 100 years. Officials said the sentence reflected the scale of harm and would deter future gang violence. With Lewis the last of the indicted members brought to justice, authorities credited interagency collaboration for closing a violent chapter in Howard County.
Acting Police Commissioner Rich Worley says back in January of this year, BPD's Group Violence Unit, which is part of the mayor's group violence reduction strategy, began investigating the Kerry Boys and their alleged sale of cocaine and fentanyl from Kerry Street, a block within the city's long-troubled Sandtown-Winchester community. As a result, these 8 members, ranging in age from 18 to 59, were identified and nearly a dozen search warrants executed.
Raheem Gaither emerged as a key figure in the Kerry Boys drug crew operating in West Baltimore's Sandtown-Winchester neighborhood. In June 2023, city officials announced indictments for Gaither and 7 associates, alleging they ran an open-air narcotics market around the 1700 block of North Kerry Street, moving significant quantities of drugs. Investigators described Gaither as a supplier manager at the center of the operation. The Group Violence Unit began probing the Kerry Boys in January 2023, building a case through undercover buys, surveillance, and coordinated raids. The investigation recovered 2 firearms, roughly 1,145 vials of coke, and 1,505 gel capsules of Fendi. In early June, officers executed 11 search warrants across Baltimore and nearby suburbs, seizing 7 more guns, about half a kilogram of powder coke, 890 additional coke vials, more than 3.7 kilograms of Mary, and over $200,000 in cash.
Prosecutors announced an 11-count indictment Thursday against 15 alleged gang members who've been accused of a slew of crimes connected to a drug-dealing operation in East Baltimore. Prosecutors say the charges against the suspects include 18 and 27 attempted. Investigators say it was founded as an alternative to the Black Guerrilla family gang. And according to the indictment, members routinely use social media websites to enhance the gang's status and identify and locate victims. And even when some members were locked up, prosecutors say they used jailhouse telephones to publicize the identities of persons believed to be cooperating with law enforcement to order assaults and of enemies of the enterprise. Some of the suspects have a history with police, including Rashad Nesmith. He was charged with attempted after off-duty police sergeant Isaac Carrington was shot back in 2019. Investigators say that was an attempted robbery.
Well, take a look. This is the man found dead near Atlanta late this afternoon, hundreds of miles from here in Baltimore, where investigators say he was the leader of the TripleC gang that's been terrorizing our city for years.
U.S. Marshals were attempting to serve an arrest warrant when they say Creek started firing at the officers and barricaded himself inside an apartment outside of Atlanta. Police say he had hostages at the time. Those people were not hurt, but it did prompt a massive emergency response and nearby apartments were evacuated. Here's how one witness described what she saw and heard. Now, after a 3-hour standoff, police say they found Creek with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Now, in that indictment announced last week, officials say the TripleC gang, which Creek was allegedly the leader of, terrorized Baltimore for many years.
Gary Hoff Creek was the alleged founder and boss of the cruddy, conniving crutballs better known as TripleC, an East Baltimore gang that emerged around 2015 as an alternative to the Black Guerrilla family. Under Creek's leadership, TripleC grew into one of Maryland's most violent crews, running open-air drug markets and enforcing its territory through intimidation and deletion. A federal indictment unsealed in May 2021 linked the gang to 18 deletions and 27 attempted deletions between 2015 and 2020, along with carjackings, robberies, and assaults. TripleC operated street-level shops in neighborhoods like Darley Park and Orchard Ridge, dealing drugs while using targeted deletions and threats to eliminate rivals and silence witnesses. Prosecutors alleged that Creek not only ordered hits, but also took contract deletions himself. Members flaunted their identity online and in rap videos brandishing guns and warning potential informants. When federal agents moved to arrest Creek and 14 co-defendants in June 2021, he fled Maryland. Investigators traced him to an apartment in Sandy Springs, Georgia, where on June 8 he fired at officers and barricaded himself with hostages, triggering a 3-hour SWAT standoff. The siege ended when Creek died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. No officers or hostages were hurt. His death came days after he failed to surrender despite a $10,000 reward for information on his whereabouts. Prosecutors continued the case against the remaining defendants, calling TripleC's enterprise built on violence. With the other 14 indicted members in custody, officials said dismantling the gang was key to curbing the cycle of retaliatory shootings and drug-fueled bloodshed in Baltimore, and a stark reminder of how far a determined gang leader would go to evade justice.
A Montgomery County gang leader is going to be spending the next 15 years in jail as the gang begins to crumble.
Andres Cortez is the man, and among other things, he's accused of sexually assaulting a teenager.
Look closely at this image. It shows members of the Lil R gang committing a gang. You can see them flashing gang signs. What you can't see and can't hear is their 15-year-old victim begging them to stop. And you can't see this man, Andres Cortez, the leader of the gang, taking the pictures. Well, today, he got 15 years in prison for the crime, and with that sentencing, prosecutors hope the Lil R gang is wiped out.
I think when you take out a leader, that sends a real message to the gang, and I think it leaves disarray.
With Cortez's sentencing, more than 20 Lil R members with nicknames like Crazy, Carrot Top, and Narco have been found guilty. Cortez is believed to have started the gang in his Wheaton Middle School. You can still see this fading gang graffiti nearby. His undoing in this case came when a co-worker reported the gang rape video was on Cortez's phone. Police found the victim and traced the crime to this Olney townhouse belonging to a known Lil R associate.
Andres Cortez, Lil R gang leader, sentenced in Olney gang rape. Andres Bones Cortez founded and led the Lil R gang, also known as La Raza, which operated in Wheaton and nearby parts of Montgomery County, Maryland. What began in Cortez's school years grew by the late 2000s into a crew of more than 20 members tied to a string of violent and property crimes. By 2006-2010, Lil R had a reputation as a scourge of Wheaton. Cortez's downfall followed a particularly heinous 2012 attack in an Olney townhouse, where he and other gang members sexually assaulted a 15-year-old girl. Instead of stopping the assault, Cortez recorded it on his phone. A coworker later discovered the video, prompting police to identify the perpetrators and track Cortez, who had fled to an address in Olney. He and multiple accomplices were arrested and charged. In November 2013, then 21 years old, Cortez pleaded guilty to a third-degree sex offense and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Prosecutors and police said removing the leader would throw the gang into disarray, and it did. By 2015, more than 20 Lil R members had been convicted, effectively breaking the crew's grip on the area. The victim told the court she believed the sentence was appropriate and expressed relief at seeing Cortez held accountable. The case underscored that serious gang activity and the coordinated law enforcement response to it exists well beyond big city borders in Maryland's suburbs. Gregory Butler, known as Gotti, Sags, and Little Dick, led the NFL Gang, an organized crew named for the Normandy, Franklin, and Loudoun blocks in southwest Baltimore's Edmondson Village. From 2016 to 2020, Butler oversaw a multi-state trafficking pipeline that moved drugs across Baltimore and into Virginia, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. Prosecutors said the network sold well over 1 kilogram of drugs tied to multiple fatal overdoses. Butler admitted he knew customers were dying, including a 2016 Rockville case where a buyer fatally overdosed the same day. Violence underpinned the business. In his plea, Butler acknowledged paying members or associates to delete rivals, and at least one contracted deletion was carried out during the gang's reign. A December 2022 federal indictment charged Butler and numerous NFL members with racketeering and drug conspiracies. Facing extensive evidence, Butler pleaded guilty. In March 2023, a federal judge sentenced him to 30 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. He admitted directing stash houses, sourcing narcotics from multiple suppliers, and supervising the street-level distribution network. More than 30 co-defendants also pleaded guilty, receiving sentences ranging from time served to decades in prison. David Alejandro Orellana-Aleman, a high-ranking leader in MS-13, was arrested on February 27, 2025, in Hyattsville, Maryland during a coordinated ICE-FBI operation. A Salvadoran national, Orellana was wanted in El Salvador on charges including firearm possession, extortion, and terrorist affiliation tied to his role in the transnational Salvatrucha organization. U.S. authorities described him as a shot caller who directed multiple MS-13 cliques across the United States, Mexico, and parts of Europe, making him one of the most senior MS-13 figures active on U.S. soil. Records indicate Orellana was first documented as an MS-13 member in El Salvador in 2016 and later entered the United States unlawfully. He was briefly arrested in Maryland in 2024 on a traffic offense before investigators connected him to the outstanding Salvadoran case. Following his February 2025 arrest, he remained in ICE custody pending potential prosecution and removal. Taken together, the cases of Brown, Orellana-Aleman, Bailey, Brunson and Hudson, Lewis, Gaither, Creek, Cortez, and Butler reveal consistent patterns: hierarchical structures that mimic organized crime, revenue streams anchored in drugs, and a reliance on fear, witness intimidation, retaliation, and targeted attacks to hold territory. They also reveal consistent countermeasures: patient investigations, cross-jurisdictional coordination, financial seizures, and stiff federal and state sentences that remove violent actors and disrupt supply chains. For communities, the stakes are immediate: fewer guns on corners, fewer overdoses, fewer retaliatory shootings. For a documentary audience, the through line is clear. Leadership matters in both crime and enforcement. When crews elevate ruthlessness to strategy, the response must be equally strategic, data-driven, collaborative, and relentless. These profiles document how that contest has played out in Maryland and why sustained, coordinated pressure is essential to keep the next wave from taking root.